Born to Kamal and Meera Mahapatra in the city of Lord Jagannath, Puri, India, Jagdish spent his childhood on its beaches until his father's transferable job took the family across India. Eventually, he returned home to complete his engineering, setting the stage for an illustrious career. Jagdish spent a decade with the networking giant Cisco in India before his big break as the country head for McAfee India. The rest, as they say, is history. Today he divides his time between San Jose and Singapore as the Chief Revenue Officer for Color Tokens, a cutting-edge Silicon Valley startup. Among his many career accomplishments, leading McAfee India to be recognized as one of the best places to work stands out as a proud achievement. As a leader, he emphasizes that work should be enjoyable and balanced, a philosophy reflected in his own life where he makes family time and family travel a priority. Jagdish is a trailblazer in public speaking, having delivered numerous TED Talks. Even when interviewed by the most celebrated Indian on TED Talks, he remained unfazed, exuding the confidence that defines his presence on stage and in the boardroom. I've never seen him nervous or tense, perhaps because he's most comfortable when he's uncomfortable. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming a dear friend and a leader with a swag of his own, Jagdish Mahapatra.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We are back after a 2 week break. My guest today is a friend I've known for almost 15 years. He and I met first when he was running enterprise at Cisco, and then he went on to become the country head for McAfee, and today he is the Chief Revenue Officer at Color Tokens, but to me, he'll always be Jag, the good mate that I've known over all this time. Welcome to the podcast, Jag.
Thank you, Zupin. It's a pleasure to be here.
We met 15 years ago, and I still remember we had a discussion about your journey to becoming a country head. And, tell us about your story from the start a bit, because coming from a state that has, a rich cultural history, but not known for its tech, if you may. Tell us about how this all transpired, Jag.
Yeah, I had to go decades back. Well, let me just jog my memory. Born in Puri, Odisha, which is one of the 4 pilgrimages of India. Most people would know that. Beautiful beach and an amazing temple that I think tells stories for eternity. I, however, didn't live there at all, so I have to be honest. At a very young age, my dad had a transferable job, so he moved around the country. So I actually landed up in the northeastern part of India called Assam. So I can I can read and write Oriya pretty well, and speak, of course, but at one point in time, I could read, write, and speak Assamese a little better than Oriya because I grew up there in early days. And that's I think was the first experiment of understanding people who can look and talk different than you at a very early age. And that was amazing. But the other part of the journey was because my father worked for ONGC, and that was again a microcosm of all the cultures that India can provide. We talk about diversity and cultural heterogeneity, but I think, Zubin, you would know how this was such an easy thing for us. I don't think we talked about that, but we lived it.
Yes.
We have friends from all religions. I'm talking to you, someone like from your community. I've got such great friends there. And I have so much of respect from people who come from different part of our culture. And the way we get together, I think we can be a role model. I think that comes in easy. So when I think of a Christmas, my neighbors were Catholics, and I've had celebrated Christmas with them. I've had Muslim friends with whom I've done Eid, the whole feast, and of course a lot of Hindu festivals. I don't think it was ever going in our head that we were so different. So that ONGC microcosm really exposed me to the north of India. A lot of our neighbors were north. So quite frankly, how it impacted, I actually started thinking I was Punjabi in my head. So a lot of my Hindi still has a Punjabi twang. My daughter still thinks I'm an imposter Punjabi. But it was always great to just pick up the smaller ways by which people say, because that's what it comes back and helps you later. Because if you grow up in one place, there is nothing wrong in it. It just probably sometimes can stymie your ability to absorb the finer nuances by which people communicate, and that creates the most confusion. So I thought I had a great time there. From there, I moved to Mumbai, which I think I'm very kind of. I still think back then it was Bombay, where you and I probably have grown up. I think a city, I think everybody should live for at least a decade to really understand the power of
It's a phenomenal.
just the energy, just the fact that you're always on the move, and the fact that you have to move on from one experience to another. Just teaches you a fair amount of. We talk about resilience. I think Bombay teaches you how to be anti-fragile. Just the whole journey from home to the school or the college and back home is a full lesson in terms of building your own mental fortitude. Forget about the strength part. I had a great time there. I studied the only 4 years. Actually, I ended up living in Orissa was my 4 years of engineering, and that actually was my best exposure to the real
Orissa.
culture,
Yes.
the real, the real way to interact. Of course, I mean, home we speak that, and I'm fairly fluent, and I made sure that our daughter, who's never lived there, still speaks very fluent Odia. So I think it's very critical part. What I'm trying to tell you here is that I think it's great to learn new languages, but I think giving up on your core mother tongue and some of the things you've grown up with can sometimes limit your ability to connect.
Very
As
true.
you go back in a global audience and you want to meet up with people from different walks of life, from different parts of the world, it's very important that you understand that. I think that's the lesson. I feel I'm very comfortable. So whenever someone says we have a trip in Korea and how are you going to manage that, you know what? I don't think people communicate with words. People communicate with their facial features, they communicate with their body language, and I think if you can pick that up, 90% of your connection is done there. And all my travel around in non-English speaking countries, I have always felt very comfortable. I haven't ever felt that I've said something that has not been understood or I have not understood them. Yes, there have been interpreters in the meeting, but I did not need them because you could understand, is this deal happening? Is this meeting going to the next step, or it's not happening? So I think that's a key part of what I would say my whole journey of moving around India is how it has shaped me. And I wasn't even thinking of that, something that you and I talked about. I wasn't thinking, but just shaped you in a certain way.
and it is also I would say good fortune. You've had some very, very good. I think we are in Singapore today, which is a lovely little melting pot. I think we have all the different. I've been here now 3.5 decades. It is a wonderful. It's how society here functions, and has that respect and understanding for all the different cultures of the world. It's not cocooned, which is probably why it makes such a great regional head office for most organizations. You think?
Absolutely. I think there is a reason why Singapore is so positioned strongly, not for now, but last decade. I think it has taken a lot of attention away from a lot of cities which could have become that. You and I know
Absolutely.
that. I've been here living for about a decade now. And moving forward, I think that will be the future of Singapore. How can it be the epicenter of the whole Asia Pacific region? And more companies are opening up, and that's not going to go away. Absolutely. And the fact that you don't feel like you are out of your country, and that I think is true for every country. I've had conversations with Australians, with Brits, and a few Americans also now here. I've got neighbors who are Italians and French, and I find them at ease, and that I think is testament to how Singapore
well
has built
Singapore
its
has
ethos.
evolved.
Correct.
Jagdish, you came to Singapore in an Asia Pacific role, obviously with McAfee, and then of course the journey after that, CrowdStrike, and now Color Tokens. Would there be any particular challenges that you think you've had to face or endure in this career, and what might those be, and how did you cope with them?
It's a good one. There are quite a few. I'll probably pick on two, Zubin. So the first one was in the early days after my engineering, I worked for a company called Larsen & Toubro, one of the
Yes.
largest engineering conglomerates in India, and then was a campus delight. I was a campus pick, and when I started the job, obviously I chose an option of moving around from manufacturing to design and to sales because I wasn't sure what I was going for. I mean, at the age of 21 in India, like most of the time you become an engineer because you studied well, then you figure out what are you going to do with that degree, right?
Absolutely.
So I was probably one of them. I thought I'm going to spend time in the manufacturing shop floor, build some, I was pretty obsessed with the concept of fuzzy logic then.
Yes.
But quickly realized the business head in me said that it's not going to feed my my aspirations. Great technology, but I spent a bit of rotational elements there, which was a program for graduate engineer trainees. One of the things when I moved back to, obviously they felt like I was meant for sales. So I don't know. I mean, sometimes you just take the feel from your mentors or managers saying, Mahapatra, you're going to come back here. I said, okay. So I went back to sales, but it was mostly institutional sales. Large B2B,
Yep.
heavy engineering sales. One of the problems then L&T was facing was the product category we were in the space called switchgear distribution, where you build this big switchboards and you fix the large generating stations and transformers and all that stuff. So we had a competitor who was giving us nightmare. Similar product, not much to differentiate, and obviously beating us in all the tenders. So I was incidentally in a plane from Hyderabad to Mumbai, and it turned out that the competitors' senior exec was sitting next to me, and we got started talking. And I realized that they had similar fears about us because they were not making money, we were losing money. So one of the things we came out saying, is there an opportunity for us to work together? We stepped down on the flight, went to my regional head, and we sat down saying, can we now look at making them one of our suppliers, extended supplier? It's a win-win. The problem was the sales team was clear because they wanted to grow the business. The factory union was always against taking work outside them. Those are the days when union was very strong.
Yep.
So we had to literally do this a little covertly under the wrap, started to pick up the engineering. So I picked up all the engineering drawings with my manager, flew down to Hyderabad, taught them how the right way to do it the L&T way, and that became a line of business which helped us survive those years. Otherwise that business could have shut down. So I think that was probably the first example of a manufacturing offshoring, which came out of a very casual conversation. So the point I'm trying to tell you is that sometimes the clue to the most complex problem is not complex thinking, but absolutely stepping back. And sometimes it just comes from conversations you think it's not going to come. So that was to me a huge moment. Of course, I moved on and to other companies, but McAfee, you're familiar when you and I had a chat around when I took on the India head role, the India CEO role. I felt, and I have to be very honest here, coming from Cisco, where we built a business from 20, 30 million to $1 billion, I felt like I was invincible, intellectually invincible. I have to be honest. And there was a fair amount of hubris saying, what is it that I can't solve now in a business problem? This and I can do it. And what the early part of the journey was. The first 1 year were very frustrating. There was not a single day I haven't told my wife saying, I should go back to Cisco. Why have I done this? I probably have never told you this. I was failing.
But I probably got the sense in some of our conversations.
The early days.
And given my profession, I do sense that when people make a big change.
Yes. And I think a big part of was I came in with an idea of what success should be, and I kind of imposed that. Because I came from a great company which had a culture of vision, strategy, execution, all the good things I've learned from John Chambers, who I think, by the way, is the best CEO I've ever worked for, will always stay like that. But you come back with that fixed template in your head. And for a year I was failing. In fact, most of the folks in APJ leadership might be thinking, who have we hired these guys?
What have we done?
What have we done? But the clue was, in one of the lunch meetings, I used to do lunch with my team in Mumbai. I think it's still a culture pre-COVID. I don't know, post-COVID, the office culture has changed, but just huddling up for lunch, a conversation with one of my customer support team guy. And he talked about, Jagdish, I think if we can do these three things, we will be able to retain some of these customers because they are unhappy about that. I said, okay, let's talk about it. I took him to my room. He spent 2 hours talking about these things that he feels are wrong, the way we deliver our customer or our product experience. I made copious notes. Then I said, I like it. I'm not going to give his name. He's a good friend now. He's worked for me in different organizations also. And I said, I need to now speak to all my employees of this. And for next 30, 60 days, I said, I'm not meeting any customers. They will come back. I need to meet. So I did that. Even now, that's the day I started writing notes. So Zubin, if you ever come to my house, you'll see my diaries from last 15 years, and they're still there. And by the way, I go back and look at them. There are still solutions or hooks to it.
Wow.
I think that helped me build something. What I'm very passionate about is to build shared goals. I think I was giving goals, which was my imagination of what it should be. But once it came from the team, we became an unstoppable force, almost like a juggernaut. Again, goes back to my Puri days of how I'm a Lord Jagannath fan. So the juggernaut,
Obviously.
that force came in. And from there onwards, for next 4 years, we were successful every quarter. Forget about the quarter part. We became a great place to work, highly engaged as a team.
Yes.
We became a top 50 great place to work. And I think always, once you
I actually
reflect
remember
back,
us talking when that happened.
Yes.
And yes.
So those are the moments
absolutely.
I think that's taught me a lot.
A wonderful
One was a little bit of an
accomplishment.
IQ part, but this was the real evolution of what you usually hit against when you think like you have a lot of IQ and hubris. And I have to tell you, it builds in. When you and you become too good with one shot, it's like, we both love cricket, right? It's
Yes.
a cover drive that defines the great man we are talking about, but it's the same cover drive can be hubris. And then he decides, I'm not going to play that cover drive for a
Absolutely.
whole innings to score that big score in Sydney match. So
Yes.
I learned, and that inspired me, saying if he could bring back his hubris, I think there's a lot for us to unpack.
Absolutely. Great example and analogy. I'll never forget that inning. The man did not hit anything on the offside for a whole 2 days.
Totally.
For those who don't know, we are talking about the great Sachin Tendulkar. You mentioned the great place to work. Personally, as someone who's known you, I think that was a great transformational moment in you as a leader. I think everybody knew you could run a business, but I think that probably because I remember talking to you that time and the joy and pleasure you had in that accomplishment. And I think that has now stayed because I still talk to people who work for you and they talk about how good it is and how you empower and all of that. You are now a mentor to many people, but talk to us a little bit about the mentors or the bosses you've had and probably, what influence have they had and how has that shaped you?
Yeah, we'll come back to the great place to work a bit more, but just on the mentors, I think I must admit this, that I've been very lucky to have had some great managers and great mentors. It's important. And by the way, sometimes when you don't have a great manager prima facie, and you feel like what's going on here, I've had friends coming back saying my manager is not supportive, toxic. We use these words now, but I think there is a gift to it. Okay, and that can only happen after you've crossed through that experience. Cisco, I had some great managers. I felt like as a youngster, there were many of them saying, you want to go speak to the camera, go talk, do a PR. There were many who were very encouraging because they didn't want to do it. And many of them didn't want to do things that I felt like I should do it. So sometimes I feel like I was a little reckless and probably I was overestimating myself in Cisco, and that got me to do things, sometimes good, bad and ugly. But I was trying to break grounds there. And thanks to all the supporting environment we had in Cisco, we learned all from the best and had a great time to be exposed to leaders like John Chambers, who fundamentally loved India so much that he would be in India
Still does.
and he's still a big advocate of India, but he used to travel to India at least twice a year. And I've been in meetings with him with large customers like Mr. Mukesh Ambani or Mr. Aditya Birla and Kumar Mangalam Birla and the whole board, and it's a learning. You could read 10 books or it could be one hour with John Chambers. That's what you learn. And so you absorb that. We're talking about Manoj. He's the one who hired me into Cisco, energy powerhouse. The thing I liked about Manoj is extremely focused. For a long time, my friends remembered that 3:30 p.m. Saturday call from Manoj would be a forecast call.
On a Saturday.
On a Saturday, that will
Yes.
go on for an hour. into the details that potentially you're not expected, but you know it's going to happen. So I would always be ready saying, guys, this is that call. So that almost became a legend. So if Manoj is listening to this, he would
Yes.
like it so much.
Yes.
So I think everyone teaches you something interesting. I also have a concept saying we should, while I think we all admire people, we should admire their qualities, because end of the day, they're all people, right? They will have their moments where they may not be perfect. So I think we should not judge people by their weakest moments, but by their strengths, strongest points. So I think I've always looked at mentorship from that point of view. I've been lucky to have good mentors as writers. One of them I can mention is Devdutt Patnaik. And Devdutt I happened to meet incidentally in some event where he was speaking, and then we connected. And my early days of McAfee,
Yes.
he's another reason why I came through, because he would sit down and draw it out for me. This is you. This is your identity. This is your role. You're conflicting your role with your identity. Try and come, and he drew it down for me. I have to be grateful that he, used to call me home and draw it out for me. This is how you work. This is what you deliver. This is what you'll come back and give me a lot of clarity. So I've never in a public platform thanked him. So great to have a mentor like a writer with him with a very different, lens to the problem I was facing. Or for that matter, I have some good friends in actors and singers, and you learn very different skills from them, from the creative people. So I think the point I'm trying to tell you is that don't pick, first of all, you got to pick your mentors, okay, for a reason, and should be clear why you're picking on them. Sometimes formally, sometimes informally, doesn't matter, but try and pick people and build a network from different walks of life. Homogeneity is the biggest problem, because they all think like I've had some great CEO friends, but they were similar thinking in terms of how I would see. So picking on people from different walks of life, a lawyer, an architect, an actor, or creative person, gives you that balance of left side, right side thinking balance. I think I've been lucky to really manage to come across these people in all parts of my life.
Talking about people that you met in your life, you once met someone and hosted a show with him. My daughter is an absolute fan of the great Shah Rukh Khan, the Badshah of Bollywood. Tell us a little bit about how that came about, and what did you get from that?
Well, that was the first TED talk. The TED India, Chris, who's the founder of TED, obviously the format is it's always in Vancouver. It's an annual event, but no one knows this. Actually, Chris grew up in India. And so,
Wow.
so he always wanted to do something that was very specific to the India appeal. So I don't know why they picked me up. So I can't ask. I never asked me the reason why they picked me up. But they got a call from someone must have heard me somewhere. And then they asked me to write a write up, which I gave them a quick synopsis, and they loved it. And then it just went through. I had no idea that the host is going to be Shah Rukh, and no idea of that. But the interesting part was it was supposed to be in English. And then I put my whole script up and I was like passionate, let's do it. And I go back on a vacation. I remember I was in Greece and I get a mail from them saying, you know what, Chris feels that it should be in Hindi, because he grew up in India and feels like it's a great language that we should connect, because it's going to be televised on a prime channel. It's going to be reaching out to 300, 400 million viewers, and most of them
Absolutely.
would probably connect if it's in Hindi. And I was panicking, because even if I'm comfortable with that language, to convert that in our world, it's, we still think in English. So I said, okay, let's work on it. So they were kind enough to give me a little bit of a Hindi coach to make it. But here's the thing, right? I mean, people who know me know that I'm a movie guy. And I think in movies, the whole storytelling and everything, I'm very inspired by. So that just started to pick my thing about saying, how should I make it interesting? Because at the end of the day, security or technology or business, while Zubin, you and I can enjoy, 95% of the world doesn't care much about it.
Yep.
They want to know, what does it mean to them? I mean, if Amazon is shipping something in 2 days back to other, what does it mean to my life? Okay.
Yep.
And how will Amazon treat me if there is a problem? How does Amazon treat their employees is how they view it. So I think as businesses, we should know that how, and that's something I probably felt like my exposure to books and movies has always helped me. So this one coming back to your question here. So then they were told that the host is going to be Shah Rukh. I said, wow, okay, great. And so he's going to, so my first interaction with him was straight on the stage. Actually, I did not meet him before. There was this whole thing around in that segment. We were 5 speakers. I was the last one to go, and he was struggling with getting my last name right. And I said, I'm going to definitely take this up. So I went and delivered the TED talk, which is there on public platform. But after that, I said, Shahrukh, you have to tell me what was so hard about my last name. It's Mahapatra, so you're struggling. He wasn't expecting that to be asked. The shoot was off. It was off next, but the segment is still there on some of the platforms. So he said, Jagdish, मैं थोड़ा सा fast बोलता हूँ. I speak very fast, so sometimes I tend to do that. But I said, but you should know that Mahapatra is such a common name in Orissa. If you go and shake a tree, 14, 15 Mahapatras will fall on you. You know, his comeback was, that's what I love about this man. First of all, his presence. He's fully present in that moment, absorbing everything you're saying. He looks into my eyes. His comeback immediately is, Jagdish, the next time I'm in Orissa, I'm going to shake up 15 trees for you. And that's the comeback. The point I'm trying to tell about him is, right there sitting and looking into all the speakers, listening in those 5 or 7 minutes, being able to absorb that and then be able to have a conversation. I think that talks a lot about how intelligent is he. But the best part is a lot of off-camera conversations with him. But what he makes people feel special is when he's speaking to you, he makes you feel as if you are the most important person for him in the whole world, even if it's for those 5 minutes. And once he moves on, he makes the other person feel like that. And I observed that special thing about him when he's talking to you, he's fully looking into your eyes, he's fully into you. And I think that's a great attribute we can learn, that when we, in a distracted world, whether it is in personal relationships, we're sitting there, we are listening, we are on our phone, I think even those 10 minutes we give to our partner, to our family, or to our employees, for that 10 minutes, let nothing take those moments away, because that'll tell us a lot about what the person needs from that relationship, from that interaction, for us also to show up as our true human beings. And we men have a little problem, by the way, as I'm spending a lot of time on psychology. I wish I had studied more history on psychology. That's the problem of growing up in India when you're good in physics and maths. People think like that's the future. But quite frankly, I don't use any of that. What I use most is psychology and all the history that I now enjoy reading a lot. Genetically, you and I, men, and I'm going to, it's a careful word about gender now. I'm assuming you identify as man.
I'm
as
perfectly
I do.
okay
I still
with it.
identify
Yes.
as man. Our hippocampus, which is where the emotions are stored in the brain, is smaller. It's fairly small. So our ability to express our emotions are genetically limited. And we must know that we must work on it to really express. We haven't grown up expressing our emotions. We've also been told by the previous generation that men don't cry and don't show their vulnerabilities, and that kind of really guides us about how we manage our relationships with our people or our family. Most importantly, family. Forget about anything else, because that's what will stay with you. And you are a family man, you and I, you know what I'm trying to say. So I think our ability to express ourselves freely with what we're feeling at this point in time is the evolution that I'm now going through, that I'm getting now as older and older. That will be the key, whether we can be better human beings or leaders moving forward. So I think Shahrukh's moments were very special, will always stay special there. Of course, managed to make sure that the whole Red Chilies was on McAfee then, but I have not interacted with him after that, so look
Right.
forward to the next
No,
interaction.
look, I think these are, like you said, and I even saw your post on Mr. Ratan Tata, who passed away recently.
Yes.
And we all, I think, I haven't seen a single Indian who hasn't been, at least in the entire professional fraternity that we are, I haven't seen a single person who hasn't been moved by it. For such a quiet man to be as influential as he was is just amazing. I mean, there are a lot of people who talk a lot, get on stage, but this person, I think him and Azim Premji are two people that come to mind who have such a bearing on society, but are so in the background. And I think your post said that.
Yes, on the post, of course, I've talked about the whole 30 minutes of experience, but just on Mr. Premji also, I need to share that. I think just the moment you said, something came to my mind. I was going on a flight to, I was in Cisco then.
Yes.
And we was flying to Bangalore, and guess what? The flight was delayed, and I was at the boarding gate back in about 15 years back, or I don't know, long back, and there is Mr. Premji also waiting to board the plane. And one of the things I quickly learned is that if you feel like you should have a conversation, just go ahead and do it. Okay, that's what I do. And most of the time, it just works well, as long as you're respectful. I said hello to him, and I said, I'm from Cisco, we are partners with Wipro, we are doing this. The first thing he says, Jagdish, I need to ask you this. we made an acquisition, something in the data center space. What do you personally think about that acquisition? Do you think it has synergy with what we are trying to do, because you understand our data center
So he
business?
doesn't know you. He's never met you.
He's never met, and he is vulnerable enough to. And I am looking, and I've had to. Obviously, I had my answer, but there is nothing that a man did not know about an acquisition is made. He's built such a great empire. He obviously knows everything about that. But look at the humility and the curiosity. And that's the curiosity I talked about in Mr. Ratan Tata's post. It's not about what he's done. It's just what he made me feel in those 30 minutes, right? It's that whole feeling. And this man, again, the way he was absorbing what I was saying and responding back to it before the boarding gate was announced, 15, 20 minutes, I said, wow. He had no reason. He could have easily shut off, not hello and hi, and that's it. And a lot of people do that as well. It just tells you that if you can just keep your curiosity meter out, and just because you said Mr. Premji, it came to my mind that he was amazing, and he made me feel like, did he really need my opinion? Or was he trying to, this is what he's doing. He's trying to get vantage points from all the stakeholders of the business. Of course, he has a stakeholder from the employees. Of course, he has a vantage point from the customers. But someone like a partner, he may not have asked that to question. There he has another vantage point, and he's just absorbing it.
And he kind of typified exactly the point you made just a few minutes ago. In like, if you want to say something or if you want to ask something, just do it. And he probably was at the whole next level where he met you.
Yes.
And he said, what do you think? I've just made a big business decision.
Yeah, I'm just a kid there. I mean, he didn't have to even, but he was engaged.
And as a leader, I think for those aspiring, I think there's a big lesson there.
Yeah.
Your source of information could be from anywhere, anytime. It doesn't have to be formal. It doesn't have to be the few data points only or the few touch points.
Correct.
Wow, what a phenomenal story. It's amazing. Do you feel that, to be successful, has there been a mantra for you? Like, something that that's your catchphrase or something that you live by? What's worked for you, especially probably when you're down, when things are not going well?
I think I'll break it into 2-3 parts. In the early days when I was young, a part of me felt like anything that's becomes easy is boring for me. So it probably came from the basic ethos of saying, yeah, I've done it, I've done trigonometry, I've solved all this problem, and I'm going to solve it again. I mean, I know how to do it. So I think it came from a bit of mindset of saying, let's do something new. I think it probably was guiding me in my early days of my career in Cisco as well, even before that. When after I did my MBA, when I was doing a bit of work with Godrej, that's another common coordinates we have there. But I think back in Cisco, I think I was constantly finding ways to do something new, and the organization was growing together, and I managed to get a lot of things. So it kind of really got into me saying that I actually, when you and I spoke about the McAfee opportunity and I finally was getting out of Cisco, I said that I think it sounds very stupid. I said I'm very uncomfortable when I'm comfortable. I don't even know what I meant to put it on. Early days of Facebook, remember we used to say, hey, let's just put it up. So that quote still comes back to me and haunts me, saying, what am I saying here? But I think that's the core trait in me, that I like to experiment, and I like to believe that if you aren't going to try different templates of life, you're going to probably stay as someone, what do I say, not intellectually, I would say emotionally limited. Okay. And I think, and I'm glad that the McAfee thing happened, because it made me a very different person because of the business environment that it was, the kind of people I had to work with, the kind of stakeholders that were there. It just changes you and evolves, gets you ready to the next one. I carried forward that learning into CrowdStrike, where I think, again, we built a very, very strong business while, the early days were hard. But then the whole thing about, many of them worked with me in CrowdStrike, by the way, that starts to happen. You build your own part. And here is what we're trying to do in color tokens as well. So I think that whole part about just don't be happy with what's there, not from a point of view of being just impatient about it. I'm far more patient now. Okay, so I will always joke around saying The P in my name stands for patience. And my spelling is Jagdish, so you can imagine that's how I was. I would like to believe it's getting better and better. Sometimes you get grounded by your family members. My wife grounds me down straight away. She's the biggest critic of my work, and I'm very glad, because she'll come back saying, you are not up to mark here, you could have done this better. I think that's a correction we all need in life, because sometimes at work you play that role too often, you come back and play that role back at home, doesn't work. I have a Gen Z at home, which is now studies in, she's doing her high school, college now, and she has a different way of really saying, no, it doesn't connect. When I was doing the TED Talk rehearsal, she was the one who was recording me and saying, no, you're not, you should say this more. Because I think the point I'm trying to tell is that as we are getting to different stages, our ability to connect with the next set of generation is very important. Our stories of the past will not take it to the future, right? So when you come back and talk about your struggle story to the Gen Z, you'll have to really put them in a very different way to inspire, because their motivations are different. So I think, to me, the other second part I'm trying to drive with this is just try and I say this because it's a hard one for men, is to read books. I think reading books is the cheapest way to learn things, because you're reading different worlds, different metaverses, for the choice of a word that we use now, of the reader. You read a book, you learn 5 new things that you'll never experience. So if you get to the habit of reading books in the way that works for you, if you can't read it, use an audible format. Now there are ways to do it, or listen to some interesting podcast like you and I are talking about. Find ways to learn constantly, because there is always something that we have not uncovered. There are still moments that I said, yeah, I looked at this problem very differently, but it is not so. And I think that's what one of the things that I've always tell me, that I really am comfortable saying, I don't know. I don't have to give the longest, smartest answer in the meeting anymore. I was actually never like that, but I think I'm more and more understanding that the more we...
Is that a bit cultural, you think, as well? I think it's more Asian, where we want to save face and not look like we don't know. I met a lot more Westerners who will just tell you that, something's interesting and don't know.
I think so. I think it's ingrained in our values to look smart and be prepared and have an answer for everything, but not having an answer is pretty okay, because we don't know where some of these technologies are taking us, being just comfortable saying. And one of the things I think we also learn as we age, you and I are starting to get to a stage where I feel that let's not make our ideas as ideologies. My problem with some of the people I've seen is that they've come with some great ideas. I've lived with some ideas of building businesses, okay? But I'm not letting that make my ideology in my new role. As I'm running a global mandate here in Color Tokens, it's hard for me to come back and say my rule book of Asia Pac is going to work here, because it's not. Because guess what? Europe sounds very different. The problems are different, or the American market is so different. So I think that's one part that I feel like has been some of the things that has helped me.
And probably with that, just staying open,
yes.
Receptive.
Yes.
And understanding. Empathy now is probably the most overused word, but I still sometimes feel people don't really get what empathy is. It's just about understanding. It's not about actually reciprocating a feeling or an emotion or an opinion.
Correct.
You made a great point about, I can't. I'm very uncomfortable when I'm comfortable. And I still remember the great Sir Vivian Richards, probably in my opinion, the greatest and most destructive player of all time, right? He used to actually say this. He said, till I don't feel butterflies in my stomach going in, I'm not. And even the great Sunil Gavaskar used to say that, right? Sorry, guys, we're using all cricket, points of reference. Can't help it when two people who love the game so much meet. But he always used to say that, I have to feel the butterflies in my stomach, for me to really get in there.
Yeah.
If I'm not feeling that. Yeah. Do you think the generations today struggle a little bit with that nervousness, or has that been a struggle always across generations? Is there more peer pressure now, maybe?
I think I think a little nervousness is good. Just on Richard, you said what swag he had when he walked
Oh
into
my
the
God.
field. It's not about what he was feeling inside, what feeling he was giving to the opposition with
others.
his right. I mean, that's a psychological
And the
warfare
butterflies in their
in
stomach.
there.
you
Yeah,
know.
it's just the psychological. That's where you go to learn. I think a little nervousness is always good. You should never go into a conversation, a deal, or whatever you're trying to close for the day or for the quarter, with the thought that you should always be that John Chambers used to say, healthy paranoia is always good. Just being a little careful about what could go wrong in a world which has got so much of variables that's not in your control. But my worry about the new generation, the power they have, is that they are no longer living in the world of information asymmetry. So, Zubin, when we started sales or our careers in building business, the power was knowledge was power. Remember, we used to say
Yep.
knowledge is power. And MIS systems will tell me inventory is low and sales are going up, and so what's going on? And the conversation was, oh, sir, I did not know that, so I'll look into it. But that's gone. You could walk into a customer meeting and say things that he or she may not have heard about. That gives you the power of knowledge, the information's asymmetry. That's gone now. You meet a customer now, 70% of what you are going to say, he or she knows.
Knows,
In fact, maybe
absolutely.
sometimes more. Okay?
Absolutely.
So that's gone. So for the new generation now, there's a lot more they can go and be better prepared than you and I ever were. The thing that probably is missing out in today's time is the relationships. Despite we can say about how our parents brought us up and childhood and our relationship, we had relationships that was physical and real. The new generation, however, is spending a lot of time on social media. Some of the worrying part I see is they date on social. They actually start dating on social and they break up on social. I'm like, what? And then I've heard stories from my daughter saying, yeah, they were in the school, they were dating on Instagram and they've broken up on Instagram. I said, did they meet during COVID? No, they did not. Like, what? So that's the part that I feel that the new generation has not been exposed so much to a real conversation. And a real conversation is you and me sitting here looking into the eyes and understanding each other. I don't have any filter that I'm using it.
Yep.
So living behind a filter is one of their problems that they will have to get off, but they can't get away. That problem is there right in front of you, the social media, and that will help them project something that they may not be. The only way to do that is just go out and meet. One of the things we are starting happening in Silicon Valley a lot and in US is return to office. Not a good topic, I know. Some people think like it's not fair. And by the way, it probably is not fair for many people where driving and traveling is not like you and I in Singapore. It's much easier.
Yeah.
But having 2 or 3 days of the work with your colleagues, being able to exchange the energy, just that exchange of energy will help us achieve so much more. Forget about the goals. It's just the whole feeling around on are we going in the right direction or not. So I think those are things I feel like are the challenge, but it also has tremendous power they have in man. The whole knowledge and the power with which they can go and take some risk. You and I could not do that. Just imagine how AI and some of these things are going to empower people to think of a business model and disrupt things much faster than it was probably 20 years back. And there is so much to be disrupted, Zubin. There is everything that I look around, I see, this needs disruption. I have a customer experience saying, this can be better. So I think that's the opportunity for them.
And, disruption is when it really happens, people don't realize it,
Yeah.
that it's happening, which
Yeah.
is the most scary thing about disruption. You kind of preempted the last question that I usually have on this, on the show, which is, if you were, I've probably got two more. Is there anything you would have done differently through your career? Like, anytime you look back and say, I wish I'd done this differently, or or is that just not you?
It's a hard one because I think whatever I was doing at any stage in time, I felt like I was clear. For example, after I finished my education in India, there was the whole trend of people going to US and doing do advanced studies there. I chose not to. I was pretty clear that I wanted to be in India and contribute there, and I think that shaped me in a way that makes me different from many other people. I mean, there's no right or wrong. So I don't think I could have done something different, but I think if I were to probably take one big learning, is don't let your idea of what other people think about you stop you from saying what is right. Okay, so I must admit that I have obviously, because we all know end of the day people have their own biases with which they look at you for a role or for an environment that you may not work, and you know that that is not right. I've had conversations with my manager and I said I can do that role, and they feel like that you can't because it doesn't look like you have that, because but that actually usually is not a very thought through answer. It is more of their bias saying, okay, this guy's background is this, why would he be able to do that? I think that's one of the things I'm taking as a learning, that when someone comes to me that I can want to take that role, I'm always saying, let's do it. Tell me how would you do it. Tell me your idea of what this should do. I think that's something you would encourage. I thought I could have done that better by pushing that a little bit more. And I felt like, that's one part as leaders we should take as a learning, saying, as a youngster who's coming in with some ideas and new things to do, just listen through that. Who knows where it's going to come from? And that's why I feel like in today's time, when the next new company will come from out of a Gen Z, most likely a Gen Z founder, the experience doesn't count. So let's get that hubris out. So I have to say that I've been disappointed with some of those leaders as well in my career, where they felt like, no, you are someone with this background, and so you can't do that. I mean, you can't take a global role, or how could you run Japan, or how could you run Australia? I mean, you're Indian, and you know what I'm trying to say, right?
Absolutely.
And people come with that
Stereotyping.
very stereotyping, and been disappointed, and not people I look up to. But then I'm also grateful that because they happened to me, because they kind of really shaped me in saying, you know what, there is a reason why they happened to me, and without trying taking names, I'm grateful to them as well.
And in closing, what advice would you have? If there's one thing that you would say to the next generation that's building, what is it that you would probably want them or think they should, do?
I think the most underrated, unglamorous aspect of our lives is the one that Instagram doesn't show. Because you're saying youngsters, and they take a lot
Absolutely.
of learning from Reels now and from Instagram and TikTok, what have you. They always show a person who is successful and talk about the success the person has achieved, but they don't really talk about all the rituals the person has inculcated in his system, in processes, daily life, that has made the person reach that stage of success. That's the problem. So when I look at a singer who has delivered a flawless singing, you haven't seen about how many times the person has rehearsed for that song, or how many years they have practiced. You go to a concert. I was in a concert of Vishal Shekhar 2 weeks back, and they
So
were
was I.
singing.
Yeah.
Were you there on that
Yes,
one?
I was there.
And you saw how he was interacting with the audience, and he was picking up. That comes with 25 years
Absolutely.
of dedication to the. I think that's the ritual part. I think we are what we practice. Okay, we will not suddenly become a great singer, writer,
A great anything.
or great
for
at
that
anything
matter.
if it's
Yeah.
so I think focus on the rituals. James Clear has written a great book called Atomic Habits. Everybody should read it. It's a book I feel like I should have written, but anyways, that's for another day when I think I share with you about what book I have in mind. But I think rituals is the most underrated skill, and to achieve that, I would always say flip the conversation to a verb. So when I meet someone and says, I want to be a writer, I say, okay, so what have you written this week? Nothing yet. So I said, next time you want to be something, put it in verb. So I want to be a comedian. Start doing some stand-up on your own, 5 minutes, and show it to family. You want to be a writer? Start writing. Okay, start writing one paragraph every day. So the moment you flip it to a verb-based goal, I think it's easier, because then I want to be fit. It's the whole the joke in my in most of the time I talk about is everybody wants to be fit, and everybody knows that you got to go to the gym, right? But how many actually go? So I always say that you're not going to turn up fit, or you're for lack of a bad analogy, you're not going to come out with a six-pack on day one. It doesn't come on day 2, doesn't come on day 3. It probably turns up one fine morning because you've just been insisting on doing that every day without thinking about when it'll happen. I think that's the part. I think rituals is the most underrated part that doesn't come up in most of the things that come to us in 30 seconds, 40 seconds of tutorials people teach us. That makes a lot of difference. All the great people, all the great writers, actors, or businessmen, that they have done this for a living. It's not, and I think that's something I want them to talk about more. The struggle. When I did the TED talk with, I've done quite a few now, but the first one with Shah Rukh Khan, I rehearsed for 100 times. Even after I was comfortable, I rehearsed 100 times. 50 of them been recorded by my daughter. Still got the videos. So I think that's the only way out. There is what looks like a flawless performer on screen. There is a lot of hard work behind. We talked about the cover driver, the man. He used to play 8 to 10, maybe 14, 15 hours a day as a youngster, because I was living in Bandra. I've seen him playing in MIG ground. I know how much time he used to spend on the ground.
His coach used to take him from match to match, to bat. It's also what Malcolm Gladwell calls the 10,000 hour rule,
Yes.
to getting to perfection or excellence. Jagdish, it's been absolutely fabulous having you on the show. I think a lot of us are going to take some very, very good. I loved you put me at ease, because I'm somebody who's often very nervous, about how things are going to go. And I'm most uncomfortable. I'm most comfortable when I'm uncomfortable is going to stay with me for a while. Thank you so much for giving us the time today, Jagdish. Thank you.
Thank you, Zubin. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.